So I sometimes think that you guys must wonder what I do with my time. And one of the things I do is that once a month I meet with colleagues, other Unitarian Universalist ministers, in our sort of near area, so Western Connecticut and points north of New York City. We meet to worship together, to speak confidentially about our lives and our work, to offer each other support and insight and additional learning. At these once-a-month gatherings, someone of my colleagues preaches. Recently, it was my colleague Erica Barron, who ministers up in Kingston, and she preached about a concept that I'd never really heard of before. It's the idea that Earth is a self-regulating living system. So Erica talks about this scientist, James Lovelock, who may be familiar to some of you. In the 1960s, spurred on by a conversation about life on Mars, he tried to define what actually makes life and how you would search for evidence of life. Basically, something is living if it organizes, builds up, over time becomes more ordered and patterned. And living systems have a variety of ways that they do this organizing and building and ordering and patterning. And among those tools are feedback loops. So you can think, for example, of your own body and of sweat, right? So a body gets hot because of external forces and then sweats in order to minimize the impact of the external force to sort of self-regulate. Or in a more positive feedback loop, you might think of how if you were to start eating more healthfully, you would feel stronger, and then that would be incorporated into your decision-making process and your knowledge, and you would keep eating in that healthy way to stay strong. So James Lovelock basically theorized that there would be signs of this kind of self-regulation, both to minimize the negative and maximize the positive on and in Earth itself. And indeed, he found evidence of a kind. So, for example, the collection of gases that make up Earth's atmosphere is a pretty uncommon collection, apparently. In other words, they wouldn't have simply happened by chance, according to Lovelock. There has to have been something at work to create and maintain these particular levels of these particular gases. He found that over the 3.5 billion years of life on Earth, quote, the climate has changed very little, yet the output of heat from the sun, the surface properties of the Earth, and the composition of the atmosphere have almost certainly varied greatly over the same period. So for 3.5 billion years, life has been sustained, which is actually remarkable. He finds it so remarkable that Lovelock writes that the climate and chemical properties of Earth seem always to have been optimal for life. For this to have happened by chance is as unlikely as to survive unscathed a drive blindfolded through rush hour traffic. So according to Lovelock, it's basically impossible that this should have happened, and yet here we are. Lovelock argues that that must mean that there is something going on beyond random chance. And what he articulates is this theory of the biosphere. That all life on Earth and Earth itself comprises a single living system, and that this singular living system is self-regulating and maintains the conditions for life on Earth. Earth is alive, and everything on it is part of it, and all together it's one great system. He calls it Gaia. And he speculates that all across the functioning of Earth, there are feedback systems that help keep our climate livable. That there's an imperative for living that this whole system feels, and that it works in ways little and big to sustain life. So if that's the case, then, my colleague Erica says, quote, This means that along with the competition with other individuals and species that we have all learned as the driving force of evolution, there is another driving force. There is another force driving some of that natural selection and evolution process. In addition to optimizing its own survival, every species also exists within this larger framework and is also evolving in ways that support the flourishing of all life. There's a cooperative as well as competitive drive in the evolutionary process. So we humans are part of that, the argument goes. Joanna Macy, who wrote that first reading, she argues this, alongside of Lovelock, that our human response to nature is part of a feedback loop that's part of this whole singular system. Our joy or amazement makes us feel connected, makes us want to preserve the natural world, or our indifference, either owing to disconnection or itself creating disconnection, makes us stop caring about preserving the natural world. When Erica preached for us, there was this hopeful note, this sense of that because we are part of this larger whole, this Gaia, this biosphere, there are forces sort of beyond us at work that will work through us. A sort of notion that this singular system is more than the sum of its parts and that it wants to sustain life over time. Joanna Macy has this hopeful note as well. She has faith in the synergy of Gaia. She writes, quote, "As parts self-organize into a larger whole, capacities emerge that could never have been predicted and that the individual parts did not possess. The weaving of new connections brings new responses and new possibilities into play. In the process, we can feel sustained and are sustained by currents of power arising from our solidarity." So being part of a whole, being part of that solidarity, brings with it a new kind of power. But it also requires, I think, that we actually feel part of the whole and prioritize feeling part of the whole. What I mean is that if our joy and wonder and amazement make us want to heal and maintain a healthy Gaia, then our continued willful or not indifference will throw a big old wrench into that self-regulating system. I know it sounds silly, but I actually thought of antiperspirant, because that question of sweat as self-regulating, right? And yet we humans, we have this capacity to work over and against the natural systems. That is part of our curse, right? We can choose to say, well, sweating is part of the temperature regulation of the body, but we think it's kind of gross, so we're going to find a way to stop it, regardless of the potential downsides. We have that knowledge and power. We have the intelligence and the technology to actually thwart natural regulating systems. And we know this is true too, we have the power to aid the regulating systems, to recognize them, uncover them, to help. But it requires a reordering of our minds and hearts, a reordering of our theology and belief systems. And I think right now about the Standing Rock situation. Peaceful water protectors have been attempting to stop a gas line from being built. And we've talked about this in here before. But since we last spoke about it, we spoke about it at a time when there were some first arrests happening. Since then, things have gotten way worse. Things have escalated. Militarized police from a whole bunch of different agencies have been shooting rubber bullets at people. Water cannons have been sprayed on the water protectors in freezing cold temperatures. When I think about that in the context of 21st century America, it's stunning. It makes me afraid for the days ahead. I'm not so innocent and naive to have imagined that everyone shared the same priorities, right? I didn't ever think that we all agreed that people over profit and health over easiness was right. But I would have said a year or two ago that our system, our American system, self-regulated against such blatantly state-endorsed violence on behalf of corporate greed. But all that aside, it does also make me think about how much work there is still to do to reorder our collective priorities, to recraft our shared vision, such as it is. Sally McFague, who did the second reading, is an eco-theologian, someone who writes about environmental issues and the questions of God, the divine, the universe, meaning. In the piece we heard some of today, she writes about what she believes needs to happen in the field of theology. Fundamentally, what she says is that we need systems of belief, theologies, conceptions of God, the divine, the world that are, quote, in favor of life and its fulfillment, keeping the liberation of the oppressed, including the earth and all its creatures, in central focus. She goes on, that is so broad, so inclusive an agenda that it allows for myriad ways to construe it and carry it out. It does, however, turn the eyes of theologians away from heaven and toward the earth. Or more accurately, it causes us to connect the starry heavens with the earth. We need to have systems of belief, McFadden says, that aid in the perpetuation of life, that aren't interested in destroying it, but in building it up. She writes that one clear directive is to understand human beings as earthlings, not aliens or tourists on the planet, and God as immanently present in the processes of the universe, including those of our planet. She stresses this in the part that we heard earlier, that our vision of what this world is, what existence is, what God is, what humanity is, must speak to the earth and its continued flourishing. When we don't do that, when we consider ourselves visitors on a way station to heaven, or owners of this thing, or better than the earth and its creatures, we are, to use a word McFadden uses, but that we don't use very often in UU congregations, we are sinning. I don't use the word sin lightly. I almost never use it, actually, but I think in this case, she's pretty right. When we deny the effect our human living has had on this earth, when we refuse to see the interrelatedness and interdependence of all things, when we step aside and don't come to the earth's aid, or when we actively work violently against those trying to come to its aid, we are sinning. When we shut down science and fact because it's inconvenient to our profit margin or our way of living, we are sinning. It's a sin of pride and greed and indifference committed against not only the earth, but also each other. And that maybe is the great sin humanity is capable of, the denial of our connectedness. Because when we do that, when we deny our interconnections, we suffer, other people suffer, the earth and its creatures suffer, Gaia, the whole living system, suffers. If you believe in a God that created all things, then surely, too, that God suffers when we deny the connectedness of existence. That denial is the source of all kinds of pain. If the militarized police at Standing Rock had at the forefront of their personal belief systems the interconnectedness of all things, they'd be far less likely to be shooting water at other human beings in frozen temperatures. If Americans had a deep understanding of interconnectedness, of oppression and liberation affecting all of us, we would likely be anticipating a different 4 years coming up. When we privilege ourselves, our needs, our fears, our hurts, our pettinesses, and greeds over everything else, we are setting ourselves and all of existence up for failure. If we had, for some reason, to drop all of the 7 principles but one, I've come to believe that the one to keep would be number 7, right, of our Unitarian Universalist principles. That number 7, we affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. That principle lays the foundation for every other. It also admits room for many different ways of making meaning and seeing the world, for many different theologies and visions of God, or no God. It calls us to treat any and all parts of that web with respect, which means anything and everything that is part of the biosphere is deserving of our care and respect. And we are all part of it. That's the heart of it. When any part of existence suffers, we suffer. That's a hard truth to live into in our daily lives, but we have to try, or we're going to keep walking down a road of earthly destruction, human oppression, and increasing internal disconnection. That video has stayed with me since the first time I watched it. I think, every time I see it, I think of my children sitting on the pediatrician's table. She's asking them with a stethoscope to breathe deeply so she can make sure their lungs are working. And I think of how most of the time we don't breathe that deeply in our daily living, and some of us sometimes forget to sort of breathe really deep, and we go so shallow that we catch ourselves. And I think of the man that I knew at a UU congregation who had chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and how it hurt him to breathe. And I think of the man that during a chaplaincy learning program I watched die, his lungs filling slowly with liquid, and that sound that you can hear, that death rattle. That's what I think of when I watch that video. And while the concept of Gaia actually gives a strange sense of hope, that the earth itself will self-regulate so that perhaps even when we're all gone and humanity is completely wiped out, one day some new type of life will come to flourish on this planet, I also desperately, wildly don't want that to be what happens. Even with all of our hideous flaws and our deep violences against each other, even with all our mistakes and our missteps, I want humanity to have a chance moving forward. I want there to be a chance that one day, generations from now, we won't hurt each other so much. That means that in all things, politics and activism, personal theology, daily living, writing, speaking, existing, I and you, if you long for that same hope for humanity, need to privilege the connections, the interconnections. We have to really live into the belief that we are part of something larger, something grander and complex and beautiful. We have to recognize that believing that doesn't make us small, it makes us whole. We have to find the places where we are reminded of that connection. Here, out in the forest, the snowy bench in the park, the dinner table with our family. We have to find those places of connection and let them heal us and help us. And then we have to find those places where the connections are lacking, where they have disappeared or grown thin. And we have to cultivate them. We have to grow them up, organize and pattern them to bring the connections into health, to make them stronger, both so that we can feel them more deeply and so that we can show them to others struggling to see how interdependent we really are. We are both so small and so powerful. When we are separate, we are weakened and we hurt each other. In our solidarity, in our togetherness, in our connection, we have the possibility of healing and wholeness. May we be growers of connection, ever strengthening the web of all existence of which we are a part. So may it be. Please rise in body or spirit for our final hymn, The Oneness of Everything. 2 verses are in the slides. We're going to do the third, so if you want to sort of get it ready for you when the slides disappear, that would be appreciated. 1052, 1052.
checks. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
The words of our benediction come from the Navajo Indians of North America. Beauty is before me, and beauty behind me, above me and below me hovers the beautiful. I am surrounded by it, I am immersed in it. In my youth I am aware of it, and in old age I shall walk quietly the beautiful trail. In beauty it is begun, in beauty it is ended. Go with an awareness of the beauty of all that is. Go in peace.